when it comes to local politics, most parties, and again, the exception being, of course, Reform UK, they tend to give their local parties a lot of leeway in what they do because they know local politics can be its own messy business. They don't want to get too involved in something that is essentially a local problem. Now, do these parties step in from time to time? Yes, but it's never like the national. It's more like the regional directors or the regional organizers will at point step in and say, hey, you need to sort this out. You know, they'll knock some heads together and get things done. Take, for example, what's going down on in Kent. If that had been a Labour, Conservative, Lib Dem, whatever, the regional head at that point would have stepped in and gone, sorry, you need to go because you have caused that much trouble, that much derision. You know, you need to go. You need to step down. But of course, she hasn't, because remember, she is Farage's hand-picked candidate, meaning that if she goes or anything like that, then questions Farage's ability to be able to choose people to put in important positions. And if this guy is talking about wanting to be prime minister, what then does that say about his decisions for who is going to be running some of the most largest important, public, civil service, officers there are? We already know that Zia Youssef and Richard Tice are already fighting about who's going to be Chancellor of the Exchequer. But we have yet to see, or at least had yet to see, would there be a rebellion from these local councils who might want to put forward a policy that does not, shall we say, conform with what Reform wants to do nationally? And here's the thing. We've just had that go ahead. We've just had that go ahead because a Reform Council has now doubled the tax on having a second home. Previously, Farage had called this idea complete madness. Why on earth would you do such a thing like that? That is just insane to do, putting a tax on a second home. So this Reform Council has now very clearly split from the National Party. And we've seen from the past couple of chaos moves what's gone in Cornwall, the fact that we had an entire local branch get completely dissolved because they lost control of it. What are they going to do about this? Where a local council goes, yeah, we need more council tax coming in, so we are going to put a tax on having second homes. How is Nigel Farage going to respond to this? Time will tell, but this is an interesting development so far. But this is normal. And most parties, again, wouldn't get too involved. However, with the control that Nigel Farage and Reform UK have shown so far, it might only be a matter of time before they do get involved. And then this is where things could get interesting. Fights might start to develop. You might start to see people leave these Reform groups on these councils. Things could get very interesting from this, I need to say. So before we get more into this, as always, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. There is, of course, the links down below, the Patreon page, the Buy Me a Coffee link, the YouTube thank you button, and, of course, as always, the YouTube membership. So thank you very much to all the people who do help and support the channel that way. Don't forget, of course, to click the like and share button as well. Don't forget to ring the bell. I'll give you notifications when we go live, etc. QR code up here will take you straight to the Patreon page as well. And, of course, as always, let's crack on then in today's story. So, Reform Council to double council tax on second homes, despite Nigel Farage calling the idea madness. And this is where it gets interesting. Because remember, Farage so far and that unit down in London have had an absolute stranglehold on these councils, really directing them in what to do, what to say, and what policies they are going to do. How much is Farage going to tolerate these, or at least a council, or councils in this case, that are free-thinking, doing policies he has actively discouraged in the past? So, A reform-led council is now planning to double council tax on second homes 6 months after Nigel Farage denounced such policies as madness and extortion. So, Reform now responded to the move by saying that the party opposed such measures at a national level, but not at the local level. And that's how they might spin it. Well, at the local level, that's fine, but, national level, not. But that's a bit of a contradiction, because if your local parties are doing that, but you're not doing it at a national level, there's a bit of something going on here. And especially when we've seen so much pressure put on by that unit down in London, I'm surprised that they've reacted like this. I think they will be maybe trying to bring them in line, but I think there is a lot of stuff we'll probably see happen next month where we go into budget season. So, councils in England do have the power to impose council tax premiums on up to 100%, of course, on second homes, effectively doubling the council tax rate. Since April 1st, of course, of this year, under legislation passed by the previous Conservative government. Around 2/3 of councils in England have so far imposed such a second home premium, doubling the council tax rate to bring in more revenue and effectively prioritise locals in the housing market. These moves have now triggered very angry backlashes, of course, from many homeowners now of second homes, however. Earlier, of course, this year, Farage publicly backed the Telegraph's campaign against local authorities imposing council tax premiums on second homes. So, again, this doesn't look good where you're doing this, and then you've got your local parties saying something completely different. That is a major departure from national policy. And that is a point where normally you might see parties come in and say, okay, maybe we need to talk about this. Maybe we need to do something about this. That is quite odd. So, he said, of course, at the time, owning a property used to be, of course, the right and the freedom. Today, of course, is now an exercise of the government to use as extortion. He told the newspaper back in April, in the run-up now to the local elections, before adding, again, in the following month, saying the whole thing is madness. Whether the downsides to now increase house prices, these people bring in a lot of money into these areas. Back in May, of course, Reform won control of 2 councils, Durham and West Northamptonshire, that had already imposed second home premiums. But Farage, of course, did not commit to pressing them to scrap them, telling them, or at least the Telegraph, he would have that conversation with our council group once they've chosen their leaders. Now, Northamptonshire, which also, of course, elected a Reform majority back in May, plans now to double the council tax on 100 and 511 second homes in the area from April of 2027. The council, of course, control executive is Reform is now set to approve these measures on Tuesday, and now to rubber stamp that mover for the whole council meeting in December. So we'll see when that happens. We'll see when that comes around, whether that will be rubber stamped or not. It will be interesting to see what pressure that unit down in London puts on the Northamptonshire councillors. It would be interesting to see if we get leavers. It's like some people stand up and mysteriously leave. We've had one in Kent basically recently mysteriously up and leave. Wouldn't say why, but interesting now that they've gone now from 9 councillors lost to now 10. Interesting in that point indeed. Anyway, another, of course, council report setting out the plan said it would raise over £800,000 from the 27 to 28, and some second home owners could, of course, sell up before the tax rises do take place. This could, of course, result in a change now of the use of property and increasing now of the availability of housing in North Northamptonshire, the council report said. When Politics Home, of course, asked Reform about this move, a spokesperson said the party is opposed to the second home premium at a national level, but not a local level. So, how is that? How can you be opposed at a national level if, let's say, every council in the UK does that, and gets money from it? What if at a national level you decide to abolish that, but all these councils have been using that because they get a lot of extra council tax and bring in a lot of extra revenue because of that? You can see once again this play between local and national politics, and that does come into play quite a lot sometimes on these parties. So far, this has not been an issue for reform nationally versus these locals. But this is that type of problem that they might actually encounter. Oh, we're fine at doing them doing it at a local level, but nationally, oh no. The problem is, pretty much is nationally, because they have the right to do that. The Conservatives gave them that right to do that, and they've been using it, which does not make sense if you oppose it nationally but not locally, and then pretty much every council does this. You know. Anyway, they said, of course, the Reform UK administration, Northamptonshire Council, is trying to work hard, trying to deliver a balanced budget to address the almost 7,000 properties shortfall in homes that they inherited after decades of local and national Conservative mismanagement. Oh, okay. Now they're blaming the national Conservative mismanagement, not the local Conservative mismanagement. Whilst, of course, at national level, we oppose such second home council tax premiums, we expect that local authorities have now far fewer levers at their disposal than the national government when it comes to addressing urgent housing shortages. So, how would a reform national government address this? Of course, they don't talk about that because they're not interested in solving that problem. If, of course, taken forward by the council on Tuesday, this move could then expose the National Party to then further criticism when it has adopted positions that it has now already elected in councils that cannot deliver. With now reform-led councils across England now abandoning all their pledges to freeze council tax and struggling actually to identify any of their major savings that the party pledged to deliver. The Politics Home analysis published just last week showed that the party has lost over 5% of its councillors elected since May, and it was described as a, quote, unusual level of churn. Yeah, an unusual level of churn. No, it's an incredible level of churn, really. The websites, of course, Durham and West Northamptonshire councils both say that second homes continue to be charged double, of course, the normal council tax rate. North Northamptonshire Council, of course, declined to comment, and North Northamptonshire Reform has, of course, been approached for comment. And we'll see if that causes them further problems. It will. It will. Further down the line, this could get worse. Now, it will be interesting to see if pressure gets put on them to abandon this. Then, of course, they've got to deliver a balanced budget. But how can you be opposed to this nationally, but be fine if this happens locally? And if most councils in the UK do this, is that not then a national policy? This could get interesting the more stuff like this starts to happen. It would not surprise me if this causes a major rift at some point. But it's just a question of when and what and how would that look like and what policy that could be. Just me on that one. Things get interesting the longer these people are in power because eventually they will have to come up with their own policy. Now, apparently, that policy unit still on its way. Still no, of course, policy yet from any of these reform councils. But as always, we keep an eye on them and see honestly what's going on at the local level with these people. Because if this is how bad it is at a local level, how bad is it going to be at a national level? So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.